I've gone over 470 plus days on nofap cumulatively and even cured my corn-induced ED. And I struggled with this problem for years, but once I had the right system, I solved it in 1 week. And now I help men do the exact same thing without wasting years of trial and error. Now let's talk about relapses, how to handle them properly, and what happens if they snowball. Now, number one, how relapses really feel. Now, let's just paint this picture, right? What happens, right? You get caught up. Maybe you see something when you're out, you're scrolling on Instagram, on YouTube, whatever. What happens? Something catches your eye. It plants basically a seed in your mind, and it kind of builds up to a point to where you just can't anymore. And what happens? You relapse, right? And you get this rush of dopamine that comes to your brain, right? Where it feels good for maybe a second, but that rush instantly fades and you're left with what? Guilt and emptiness, right? You feel kind of empty. You're like, man, I took the L again, right? And in that feeling, that energy that you had, you kind of got some brain fog right now. And you're basically just there kind of chilling, right? You know there are things that you need to work on, things that you need to accomplish as a man, but because you've done this, you kind of just put yourself in a lower version of yourself to where you're kind of relaxed and you're okay with being a mediocre, right? And of course you feel like you're back to square one, and the cycle of shame and all of the guilt that you've had starts again, right? And this emotional crash is why so many spirals, right, tend to just happen. It is basically on a cycle of repeated slip ups. Now, number two, what I like to say is when it rains, it pours. And what happens is when people tend to relapse, it's like you get to a point where you say, okay, this isn't that bad. Oh man, I already took the L. I might as well keep going. And people tend to relapse back to back to back, right? So whereas someone had one slip up, what happens is they have 2, 3, 4 slip ups. And basically because you've already taken the L, you're like, I'm already too deep into it. And of course, when you do relapse, your brain chemistry also does get affected, and especially your willpower. So the mechanisms where you can have that type of resilience and willpower actually get, in a sense, rewired so that you don't have the same sort of resilience and discipline as you would have if you weren't relapsing all the time. Now, you got to brace for impact, right? Because it's once you get that spark, it's like, man, I need another hit, basically. It is what people look at it. And having this awareness is the first step to actually solving this, but moving in the right direction for you. So now that you know it rains, it pours, and a lot of times, one relapse leads into a bunch, right? How can we actually solve this problem and to limit or prevent relapses, right? Now, and how do we recover from it? Number 3, limit free time and obsess over goals. Now, one thing I've noticed is the more free time you have, and if we just think of likelihood, right, especially at the start, maybe later down the line, you go 3 months, 6 months, you'll be fine. But at the start, we really need to limit that free time that you have, especially with things, when you're on the internet, right? If you're reading a book or doing something or whatever, you're chilling. It's not that bad, but empty hours are really a breeding ground for relapse. And if you're watching this, right, you're probably an ambitious man. You have goals that you want for your life, right? Maybe it's to make more money, get a promotion, get the aesthetic body that you've been looking for, trying to work out, whatever it is, right? Maybe get a certain type or quality of partner, right? Whatever it is, you have certain goals in your life, just as a man, right? With testosterone. What you need to do is fill your calendar with these type of goals. Maybe it's even to be more social, meet more people, network, right? Do these things. Literally go meet other people, talk to them, right, about these different topics. Because what happens is when you have that free time, there's something in your back of your mind that says, oh, I have free time. I can kind of do whatever. And it's very easy to go down the path, right, of, okay, one thing catches your eye and boom, you're back to square one. Right, so you really need to obsess over the progress that you want for your life. For me, I always knew, right, it was building businesses, working out, and I did those things all of the time, and that really helped keep me on track. And if you really want a step-by-step game plan into exactly what you need to do, And even to see the type of results, 470 plus days cumulatively, it even cured my nofap ED. If you're interested in getting that step-by-step system, click the link in the description below where I break everything down for you. Now, number 4, study patterns and build a game plan. I can't stress this one enough, right? The whole point of this is, okay, we're getting aware of the problem. You know, when it rains, it pours, right? And you've been through that same situation too. What you need to keep in mind is that you need to study the patterns and how these things happen to you, right? So if you think about it, a lot of times it's the same cycle that's happening over and over again. So what does that mean, right? It could be, for example, you go on Instagram, right? You see something, right? It plants that picture in your mind, and then you kind of doubt if you want to continue on this journey, right? Of retaining your seed, and what happens? Boom, you end up back at square one, right? And it happens over and over again, in probably the same exact way over and over again, right? So what you really need to do again is, we're becoming aware of the problem, but then we also need to build a game plan to basically plug in the holes in our armor, in our system, right? So for Instagram, there are a bunch of different things you can do to kind of weaken Instagram's hold on you. But in general, right, just spend less time on there. Maybe even spend less time on your phone. The less power and time that you give to these things, right, you kind of build up a game plan specifically for you. And that's the thing, people relapse differently. Maybe it's you're out, you're in a certain environment and then you see things, or it's on your phone. But whatever it is, you have to account for that and build a game plan to plug those holes. Because if you don't, the same cycle is just going to happen again. And remember, we always say the person, if you're a person that does the same exact thing and expect a different result, that is the definition of insanity, right? So if you want a different result, you have to do different things, right? So identify what that setup is for you and cut it at the core, cut it at the root. So when you're making moves, you're doing what you need to do in life, you don't have these things that are holding you back, right? And number 5, it really leads me to this point of environment beats willpower. And this kind of leads, even talks about our previous point as well, where I was talking about the game plan. Well, the environment is just as important as the game plan, right? Because if you focus on just the game plan, but you don't change your environment, right, or make it as easy to win, right, as easy to not relapse as possible, then what happens is you're fighting against the grain, right? And a lot of times, a lot of famous people have kind of mentioned this as well. The easiest way to change a behavior is to change your environment, right? Not just try to change your actions. Because think about it. If a stream is going downhill and you're trying to swim upstream, don't you think it's going to be difficult? But if you have the ability to change the direction of the stream or turn the intensity up or down, it's a way that you can make it easier to go in the direction that you want. And that's how you have to look at it, right? So you want to look at your environment as a whole and craft it so that you can be successful, right? Because discipline is going to fade, right? But really your setup, right, and the systems that you have in place is going to decide what you end up achieving. So you want to remove some of those triggers, right? You want to change your routines and create as much friction as possible so that you can move in the right direction that you want. And the right environment really makes relapses the hard choice and not the easy one. And that's exactly what you want to optimize and set this up for. Now, number 6, remember how it felt. Remember how it felt when you relapsed and lost your progress, right? Because people tend to just get caught up in the now, right? In the instant gratification. That's all it is at the end of the day. You're trying to jump the gun, right, and not put in the work necessary to, achieve the partner that you want, right? Whatever, that's really what it is at the end of the day. You're trying to jump the gun, right, and you're probably escaping certain emotional things you're going through. Maybe it could be stress, all these different things, right? You're escaping them, and you want to get to this point to where you're chilling, basically, right? But you have to remember, our brains are not wired. We're not wired in that direction. They're wired for us to have the time, energy, and attention necessary to, reach our potential and then, of course, attract the type of partner that you want, right? And what you really need to do is remember how it felt once you lost progress, because it didn't feel good when, you went 30, 60, 90 days, and then you went back to square one, and you felt like all progress was lost. You felt like you were back to square one, a failure. And it's important to remember this, because just remembering it in and of itself, right, without anything else, actually can give you perspective in terms of, okay, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I should question, the feelings that I have right now. And that will help you as well, because your mindset is everything and pain is fuel, right? So you can use that situation as, man, I remember I was stuck, I was in a bad spot, and I've come so far on this journey, and use that pain to propel you, right? And use that memory as an anchor to keep you strong. Number 7, momentum comes from bouncing back fast. Now, momentum is one of the most important things in this journey, right? Because you only need a couple of days under your belt where you gain momentum and you're in basically a routine that's allowing you to be successful. And then all we need to do is multiply that routine over a longer period of time. So if you can go for 3 days, all you need to do is keep that same routine, and you can go even longer, right? But it's a proof of concept that your system can work, but you need to actively monitor and plug the holes as they come up, because you're going to have temptation, things are going to come your way, but it's important to actively monitor and manage what's going on so that you can increase and actually know what works specifically for you. Because yes, there are definitely universal things that can help, but at the end of the day, you have to look at your specific situation and realize that once you gain this momentum, it's going to be an afterthought. You're not even going to have these thoughts about, relapsing, because you've gone so long and you've literally changed your identity. You become the type of person that doesn't do that. And, or even if you do, it's not the biggest end of the world, because you've been so focused on the goals and what you actually want to do and achieve, in your own life. And if you're interested in learning more about this topic and want to learn more, and don't want to have and go through all the trial and error, years of trial and error, click this video on the screen now.